Chapter 12 with Myers talks about emotions, and so that's what we're going to take a look at in this one real quick. What is an emotion? And when we try and define an emotion, it's sort of like intelligence. It's very difficult to define. And so over the years, we've kind of come to the agreement, I guess, that an emotion consists of three component parts. That's feelings. Okay, these are the thoughts, or generally when people talk about an emotion, they talk about that feeling that they get. So your thoughts and feelings. It also includes some physiological arousal. Now, this would be, for example, the heart starts pounding, a little faster, the palms get sweaty, maybe you get a little nervousness, the hair on the back of the neck stands up, that type of thing for physiological arousal. And then there tends to also be some sort of observable behavior. Little children are very obvious with this. If they get mad, they throw a tantrum, or they kick something, or they cry and yell and scream. That's observable behavior. Now, adults have learned over the years to try and control the observable behavior, but even at that, not everybody does. So, now, when we study emotions, there's a variety of things we have to consider because these are not the easiest things to study. For one thing, emotions are very subjective. Okay, when somebody says, "Oh, I love you," Sally looks at Johnny and says, "Oh, Johnny, I love you." She may be thinking one thing, but when he says, "Hey, I love you too," he may be thinking of something totally different. The word love or the word hate or whatever, any type of an emotion that you can think of, a lot of times have different meanings to different people. And because of that subjectivity, it's very difficult to really study these things scientifically. Now, one thing you can kind of evaluate when you look at emotions are faces. Now, we're going to talk about faces more in just a few minutes, but we've found over the years that faces do not necessarily determine necessarily an emotion. They don't guarantee the emotion, but faces can tell us a lot about emotions. We found that facial expressions are universal. You can look at people from any different culture around the universe and you see the same facial expressions, and generally associated to them are the same meanings. So, one thing that maybe this is giving away a little secret that some people might not want to know, but or want this to be known, but one other thing that kind of gives away our evaluation of certain things, our emotion attached to certain things, is the pupil of the eye. If the pupil of the eye gets bigger, well, then we tend to like what we see. If the pupil of the eye gets smaller, then we don't tend to like it. So, for example, ladies, if you go out and buy a new outfit, and you wear that new outfit and you go up to your boyfriend and you say, "Hey, what do you think?" He may tell you he likes it, but if you look in the pupil of his eye, and if that pupil constricts, then that basically means take the outfit back. Okay? Don't give him a lot of grief. Just take it back. He doesn't really care for what he sees. But if the pupil of the eye gets bigger, he likes it. Last thing we'll look at real quick on as far as studying emotions is the polygraph. And the polygraph, the common name for this is the lie detector test. Now, in reality, this does not technically judge lying. It judges a variety of physiological responses. So a polygraph will check, heart rate, blood pressure, a variety of physiological responses with the idea that if a person is lying, they're going to be more nervous and they're going to react physiologically to that nervousness. Now, some people obviously can have learned to control their emotions to the point where they can, quote, beat the polygraph. So we tend to think that the polygraph's about 70% accurate. It's not perfect, and it is not allowed in a court of law unless both parties have agreed ahead of time to allow the polygraph results to be used in court. And that usually doesn't happen very often. Now let's take a look at the various theories of emotion. Where does emotion come from? What causes emotion? And that sort of thing. Probably one of the oldest theories that we look at is the one by William James and Carl Lang. William James is the same guy who wrote the very first psych textbook, Principles of Psychology. And this theory comes all the way back from the 1890s. Now, James and Lang, in their theory, they believed that essentially the physiological arousal that we talked about, the heart beating, the palm sweaty, the reactions like such, that those physiological arousals actually cause an emotion. So in other words, we react before we even realize what the emotion is. All right? Now they believe that each emotion has a unique pattern of physiological responses. So therefore, the brain doesn't have to really work a lot. They believe that in the brain, it's programmed in so that when your body does certain things, it immediately knows what that reaction or what that emotion is. So for example, if you see a vicious dog looking at you and starting to growl at you, our sympathetic nervous system kicks into gear and we start running immediately. But then it's after that point when we become aware that we're actually afraid. So we're experiencing fear. But that fear doesn't come along until after all those physiological things have taken place. Now, the one criticism about this theory, if you think about it that way, the physiological causes the emotion. Think about people who have had their spinal cord severed at the neck, and so essentially they're paralyzed from the neck down. According to the James Lang theory, this would apparently indicate that these people would not be able to experience emotion because they wouldn't be able to get the feeling from those physiological arousals. However, we know that that's not true because people who experience those situations, they continue to experience emotion, and just like they did prior to whatever their accident was. Now, if we kind of fine-tune the James Lang theory, that leads us to what we talk about as the facial feedback theory. Now this, believe it or not, was originally thought of way back with Charles Darwin, but in essence what this theory says is that it's the exact same thing. They believe that the facial expression occurs, and we talked about how universal facial expressions are, that the facial expression occurs and then the brain recognizes that pattern of our face, and then as a result the emotion occurs. So where James Lang was talking about a variety of physiological responses occurring and the brain recognizing all those things, this particular theory focuses strictly on the face. Now again, this would be a very low level of cognition. Our brain is kind of pre-programmed to understand certain facial expressions. Now, again, if you evaluate this one, take for example a coach like Tony Dungy. Tony Dungy, if you ever watched him coach the Colts, he rarely ever reacted with any type of facial expression. So if this theory would be true, then that would mean that someone who expresses a lot of emotion in their face would be experiencing more emotion than somebody like Tony Dungy. but I'm not so sure that that's necessarily true all the time. All right, let's look at let's look at a third theory. Okay, hit the wrong place there. Physiological, this is another physiological theory, but this is the Cannon-Bard theory. And basically, this says that the physiological arousal does not cause an emotion, but essentially our cognition, our awareness of the emotion, occurs at the exact same time, simultaneously, to the physiological arousal. What this is saying, what Cannon and Bard are saying, is that as we experience an emotion, as something happens, signals are sent to our brain, to the thalamus. Okay, all senses except smell go into the thalamus. And once the thalamus, it hits the thalamus at the same time sends multiple messages out. It sends a message to our limbic system, which is the emotional center of our brain. It also sends a signal out to our frontal lobes, which is basically our cognitive awareness of what's going on. And then our reactions, our physiological reactions, are also occurring at the same time. So they say that one does not necessarily cause the other, that they all occur essentially at the same time. Now, that's the Cannon-Bard theory. Let's take a look at one other theory, and this one puts much more emphasis on the cognitive aspect. And this is what's called the two-factor theory, Stanley Schachter and Jerome Singer. Now, in this one, they believe that the physiological arousal, obviously occurs, but there's one more step that they put in here, and they believe that our mind, our brain, whatever, interprets what's going on as a result of our body. So, for example, our heart may start beating real fast, something like that, but we immediately analyze the situation, and we kind of say, okay, what's taking place here? I'm walking into a room where I don't know a lot of people. My palms are sweaty. My heart's racing. I am a little jittery. And we label that emotion. Okay, we kind of evaluate it cognitively. So we're analyzing the situation as well as what's going on physiologically. That's the two-factor theory of Schachter and Singer. Now, I'm not trying to say any of these theories are necessarily perfect or the one that you need to believe in. These are four theories of emotion. These are not the only four theories. There are also others, but do make sure you understand the difference between, like, the three theories that we talked about first, which put a heavy emphasis on the physiological aspects of the emotion, versus like this theory here that puts much more emphasis on the cognitive feature.